Alright, in this video, you guys asked for it. We're going to talk and rant a little bit about physical compositions. This video is really meant to talk about the strengths of what groups are currently playing on the ladder that aren't playing meta, and maybe give you an idea of how to form a comp if you're in Group Finder, if you're someone who's pugging, or if you're a group of friends looking to run a composition like this. So let's just dive into it. So the biggest thing about compositions is that you want to build synergies, and some classes are more synergistic than others. Now, the biggest thing that classes bring to a comp is going to be their utility or their raid buffs, I would say. So for things like Warrior, it's attack power. For Mage, it's arcane intellect. For like monks, it's mystic touch. These are kind of obvious ones. Now, other things you have to keep in mind are like damage palettes. You have to think of how healers and tanks interact with each other. Some tanks are a little bit more hands-off, the healer doesn't need to touch them, and some are a little bit more interactive. The tankiness of a composition also comes into play, not just your tank, but how strong are your DPS against certain damage types. So all of these things need to be taken into account, and of course you're always going to have a meta composition, and right now what we're seeing is the Demon Hunter, the Priest, the Arcane Mage, Boomkin, and Unholy DK. Now this isn't to say that these classes aren't just really, really strong, but they also are extremely synergistic. Now the same can be said about physical comps, so let's talk about it. Now, as most of you know, that I would assume are watching this video, I'm a Brewmaster main, but I also dabble in a lot of the other tanks, mostly Protection Warrior currently in this season. And not only my group, but other groups have been seeing a lot of success on the ladder, pushing some of the highest keys in the world by playing a physical composition. And so for this first example, let's talk about the Brewmaster comp. Now, Brewmaster is not a tank that is known to be able to pull off large pulls. They're probably one of the only tanks that requires a lot of healing from the healer. And not only that, but oftentimes they get punished by pulling extra large because of a smaller health pool, certain defensive cooldowns not being as strong as others. Stagger kind of works to their detriment in dungeons, where it's very, very impactful in raid and almost makes them immune to dying. In Mythic Plus, it's kind of the other way around. So we need to play with classes that don't necessarily care if we pull 40 mobs or 3 mobs. Actually, preferably something closer to the former. Or the English. Basically, we're going to be pulling fairly small. So target capped classes are often going to actually come to a benefit in this composition. Now we're bringing 5% physical damage. This is extremely strong. This is going to give all physical damage a 5% buff. So what classes deal physical damage? Now we have things like Outlaw Rogue. This does, I would say, 98% physical. There's a couple things like if they're running Twilight Devastation or something like that right now, their poisons do a little bit of nature, but they're doing about 98% physical. You have things like both warrior specs here doing almost, if not all, pure physical. Marksman Hunter is doing about 80% physical damage. Beastmaster Hunter is in a similar boat. They do some nature damage, some arcane damage or whatever, but they're mostly doing pure physicals. Obviously, things like Windwalker is going to do a fair bit of physical as well, but we don't want to class stack with the Brewmaster, and we have things like Feral Druid. So really, any of these DPS are really, really strong. Now, there is an argument to be made that either of the Shaman specs are also fairly good to be played in the comp like this. Now, while they're mostly doing magical damage, they have a few things that are physical, but the big thing that we want to bring is the Wind Fury buff. The Wind Fury buff is arguably by far one of the best raid or group not cooldowns, but like buffs you can give to a group. But beyond that, it benefits a lot of these classes beyond what most people realize. Extra auto attacks means more procs, more rage, more combo points, more energy for a lot of these classes, where you'll normally be playing something like a Resto Shaman for your healer. So if you're not playing Resto Shaman, filling in with one of these classes while they're not fully doing physical damage brings enough for the rest of the composition to really, really work. Now, personally, what I've been playing is the first thing I like to slot is a Warrior. Now, Fury Warrior, unfortunately, is just not doing as well. This is they're mostly being hindered by their target cap. Fury Warrior is great. I love playing with a good Fury Warrior. I've played with a couple of this season, some of the top on the ladder, and holy shit, they fucking pump. They do a ton of boss damage, but when you try to do some of these larger pulls, like first pull of Cinderbrew, first pull of Floodgates, they kind of fall off. And so Arms has been more popular, so we're going to assume that we're playing with an Arms. Now, the reason I like an Arms Warrior in a comp with a Brewmaster is because attack power is, it's double dipping. You're gaining essentially an additional 5% damage off of the 5% attack power, but you're also benefiting getting more healing from your Slusher Brews. A lot of your healing has attack power modifiers on them. So playing with a warrior is just double dipping on kind of on both the healing and damage capabilities of the Brewmaster. Next, I do like to play Outlaw. You can play any of the rogue specs, but Outlaw tends to be a little bit better. They're mostly doing pure physical damage. They also offer a lot of cool utility in their kit. They're extremely tanky, so they don't need a lot of healing from your healer. Same with Arms Warriors. They don't need a ton of healing in most cases. And you bring tricks of the trade. They're normally playing Trickster, which has permanent tricks, so as long as they're in combat and you're in combat, you're going to be getting aggro, which is extremely helpful when you're playing with Arms Warrior, which is very bursty. It's like basically charge into a Warbreaker into Avatar Demolish, and that damage can often overwhelm the Brewmaster Monk, and it'll kill the Warrior. Now, if you have an Outlaw Rogue there, it counters that. Really good. Now, next, I'm probably going to say you don't want a class stack. So I would say your next two options for the last DPS spot would be one of these two DPS. I really like playing with the Shaman because of Wind Fury, as I talked about before. What I've personally been playing is Feral Druid. Marksman is really good. They're doing mostly physical damage. They bring in extra tricks. They bring a good utility kit as well. They're a ranged DPS, which can be monumentally impactful in some keys, like Rookery, for example, when you don't need or you lose a lot of damage for being in melee. Having someone able to sit in range is really nice, but when you're playing with a full physical composition, you're going to be seeing something like this. Feral Druid, the majority, I would say like 98% of their damage is physical. They're bringing a really nice kits. They're the class that's going to do what like an Unholy DK does or an Arms Warrior does, where they can do a tremendous amount of large damage in uncapped pulls, which make pulls go by pretty good, pretty well. They also bring the versatility buff, which is extremely impactful. You're getting 3% additional damage on top of having the arms and the Fizz Dam buff plus attack power. And you're getting a 1.5% DR. While it's not crazy, it's still worthwhile having, especially for the damage part. So we're gaining about 13% damage across the board, on top of also having Wind Fury, which I said before is extra procs, extra combo points, extra rage, extra resources. So this is all good. And of course, we have the Lust. So when you're making a comp and you're playing a Brewmaster, this is ideally what you want to see. Of course, you can slot a Fury Warrior. You can slot either of the Rogue specs. You can do Sub or Sin. You're going to generally see Sin more. The reason I like Sin is not because they're not doing the most amount of physical damage, but they are uncapped, and they have some of the, or arguably the strongest priority damage in the game with Deathmark. And so similar to like what the meta comp is doing with Arcane Mage, they can pick a single target on a 2-minute CD and just annihilate it. It's going to die so much faster than the rest of the stuff. They get insane funnel. It's one of like the only true funnel classes left in the game. So Sin is also a good replacement. You're going to see this being played a lot on live as well, mostly because when you get to these higher keys, the bigger health mobs are more dangerous. They take more time. And when you have prio damage, it's insane. So let's kind of move on from this comp and let's talk about, oops, I'm going to do this. I'm going to change this back to Outlaw. Or should I keep it Sin? I don't know. Let's talk about some other compositions that work for physical. Now, one big thing you've been seeing is Squish Vegan's group, as well as a couple of other Guardian Druids running a similar physical comp. So you have the Guardian Druid kind of taking place of the Feral. And what you're going to see is you're going to see kind of the consistency of keeping these DPS in. You're going to kind of have like, or these 6 classes. So they are playing, I know Squish Vegan's playing with Banchers. They're also playing with Noxiv. And of course, they're playing with Nox, or Wox. There we go. Words are hard. And I just deleted the thing. Hold on. Where'd Hunter go? So they're playing something very similar. You're seeing the Warrior, you're seeing the Rogue, you're seeing the Druid. Now they're not playing the Brewmaster, but they are playing the Mistweaver. And so the Mistweaver makes up for the Brewmaster. The Rogues, the Warriors are the same. They are losing out on the Wind Fury buff, but they still have a ranged DPS, which is nice for some mechanics, like first boss of Mecha Gun Workshop, for example. It's nice to have a range there because they're going to do all the bombs. But they still bring that Lust. They bring things like True Shot, and they also have a pretty good CC kit that doesn't diminish with other things. So when you see a composition like this, this is also considered a physical comp. So if you're a Guardian Druid player or you're playing one of these specs, you can definitely opt to run something a little bit more niche and nuanced. But again, you're still seeing the same 6 classes being represented. Now, moving on from that, you can definitely play something with a warrior tank. Now, of course, if you want to get a little bit more physical damage, you can always slot the Windwalker. I haven't had experience playing with Windwalker this season. I think it's actually one of the only specs I haven't played with. I've personally played it as an off spec, but it's like in plus 12 keys. But kind of similar thing. You have the warrior still in. You still have the Windwalker in. You can definitely slot a Sin Rogue, for example. You can still play with a Feral Druid if you want, or a Hunter. And then again, for just a resource economy, you just bring the Resto Shaman once again. There's a world with a comp like this that you can also play Presevoker. I think Presevoker has a lot more weaknesses this season than it has in past seasons. But either way, I would actually personally just slot this instead. But this is also a good composition. Now, one last thing I want to talk about, and this is kind of an extension of physical comps, is more or less melee comps over physical. And so this is something that I've been playing a lot on my warrior, is instead of sticking to like the pure fizz, we're opting to drop the Windwalker Monk. And the reason for this is because attack power has an extension to be able to play something like a Havoc DH, or an Unholy DK, or a Ret Paladin. And while you're not benefiting from physical damage, you can start slotting things like this type of comp, and all of a sudden it kind of extends out from the physical comps into more of just the melee comps. So I've been playing a lot of this as well, slotting in the Resto Shaman once again for that lust. Now, what I like about this comp is still, it's extremely durable. Ret Paladins are fairly tanky. They also have a lot of ways to just stop damage. Everything from having Shield of Vengeance to Divine Protection to having Bubble to Sack to Bop. They're allowing basically this comp to just stay alive forever. But what's funny about that is that they don't even need to. It's essentially all they're doing is they're playing a little game of keep the Prot alive or keep the Shaman alive. The Unholy DK, of course, has a lot of niche things going for it. It has things like Death Grip. It has insanely high damage on a 1.5 minute cooldown, so you're able to pull really big. Prot Warrior also allows you to pull extremely large, compared to something like a Brewmaster Monk. The Ret Paladin does consistent damage, the Outlaw does really consistent damage, and you pull around the Unholy DK CDs, and you also lust for the Unholy DK. The Resto Shaman is still bringing the Lust, it's still bringing the Wind Fury, it's bringing all of these extra CCs that aren't going to overlap too much. And what I like that I didn't really mention before is that Protection Warrior brings kind of diminishing return protection, which is super convenient. So when you do eventually DR, because you have Outlaw stuns, you have Ret stuns, you have Shaman stuns, you have Shockwave, the Resto Shaman and the Protection Warrior both bring knock-ups, which is awesome. So these kind of compositions, when you're looking at like a physical comp or a melee comp, have been some of my favorite to play so far. Like I said, I haven't been playing a lot of Windwalker. Normally in a comp like this, we're still bringing, like, I'm playing with the rogue I normally play with, or rogues I play with, are generally all playing Outlaw. A couple times we've had them swap sub, but what we normally have been throwing in this slot is something like a Ret Paladin. The Ret Paladin's super nice as well when you're playing with a Feral, is because they can send their kind of group utility like Sack and Bop on the Feral Druid, which can help the Feral Druid live, because in a comp like this, the person who's going to die the most is going to be the Feral. So these are the comps that we've been seeing in terms of physical comps, as well as the melee comps that I've been playing. So I hope that helps kind of understand what classes you should be looking out for. When you're playing these tanks, you kind of want to stick to the same subset of healers, and you kind of want to stay away from casters if you can, because as soon as you add an Arcane Mage instead of like an Unholy DK, this comp all of a sudden has a lot less synergy, because the Arcane Mage is bringing a buff that only affects the Resto Shaman, and now the Prot Warrior is only bringing a buff that buffs Ret and Outlaw. And so when you start kind of splitting up, and let's say maybe you add like a Dev Evoker instead of a Ret, now all of a sudden this comp's like a little wacky. You're kind of just bringing the tank just to bring a tank, and if you're going to go in one direction, you might as well go all the way. So at that point, you would just slot you'd slot a Vengeance, and then you would probably want to get rid of your Outlaw for something else. Something like, I don't know, like a Destro Lock or something. I don't know, I'm just making this up. But yeah, that is that. So I hope that makes sense. It's kind of my little rant about it. I love the synergy here. Obviously, I'm in a raid planner, so it's kind of goofy. But basically, synergies are extremely important, and you should play to them if you're looking to be successful in keys. I'm not saying you have to do this. It's just if you're starting to push, or you're with a group of friends who are looking to play a set of characters that work well together, this is what I would say. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, leave them down below. And of course, I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.